Well, welcome on in, everyone, to another edition of Navigating Trump 2.0. This is the show that takes a look at what happened this week in the nation's capital through the lens of this second Trump administration. And joining me, David Brody, chief political analyst for CBN News, and Dan Andros, host of the Quick Start podcast here for CBN. Guys, we got started this week with President Trump declaring a national emergency in Washington, D.C. in the wake of a violent assault perpetrated against a former DOJ staff member by residents of the city. It was just a random act of violence, it would appear, and Trump decrying violent crime in the city of Washington in a press conference on Monday, made the announcement that he was going to federalize the Washington, D.C. Police Department, that there was going to be it was going to be run by the DOJ, and there were going to be federal law officials on the streets to make sure that violent crime in the city was tamped down. Also talked about wanting to beautify the city and move some of the homeless encampments that were in some of the city's parks out of the way. About 850 federal law enforcement officials were mobilized this week at the behest of the DOJ. And D.C. law enforcement, I think, has been generally receptive to the help, but it's only allowed to last for 30 days without Congress needing to give approval for this. Many Democrats are up in arms, saying that it's a power grab by the president. So, David, we're a few days into this now. The Trump administration's decision to declare a state of emergency and federalize the D.C. police force. From where you sit, how's it going so far?
Well, first of all, Democrats are calling this a power grab. Okay, well, so maybe they want to add another word to it, which they won't, which is lawful. I mean, it's a lawful power grab. I mean, this idea that, Donald Trump is this authoritarian who wants to, dictate and have power and control and all X, Y, and Z. Well, check with Congress. The 1973 Home Rule Act allows him to do this. So this idea that he's doing something, outside the norms of what is allowed, it's within his jurisdiction to do so. So I think we start there. And from there, we go on to whether or not and how he'll extend this past 30 days. He can't. This idea that he said the other day that, hey, if I need to basically bypass Congress and, then I'll do that. You will? Can someone cite me the statute on that? Can someone let me know? Quick. I mean, we're on the air, so someone let me know now. I've looked everywhere. I've consulted with folks. I don't see it. They don't see it. So I'm not quite sure what he's talking about. The only thing I can think of is what he's already said, which is that he wants to introduce this crime bill, if you will, that would allow the district to be under federal control for more than 30 days. That would be in a bill, but other than that, I don't see it. And of course, we keep talking about this 30 days. Well, so what has to happen? Well, the Senate and the House both have to approve joint resolutions to allow President Trump and this administration to continue what they're doing now. But you have to get 60 votes for a joint resolution in this case. Sometimes you don't need to get 60 votes, but in this case, you do. And good luck trying to find 7 Democrats in the Senate to try and do that. So, look, I think ultimately Democrats are, once again, as my dad likes to say, in a pickle. They're in a pickle here. They're having margaritas, so to speak, down in El Salvador. And now they're in a situation where they're going to the PDF strategy, which is, hey, look at the stats. They're not so bad. Well, hold on for a second. Washington, D.C. still the 4th largest homicide rate in the country, violent crime rate as well. So any way you slice it, even if crime is, quote, down, and we can talk about that because some numbers allegedly have been fudged, but let's put that aside for a second. Even if the numbers are down a little bit, down from what? So if you're the Democrats, are you really arguing that, well, it's not really, really bad in D.C., it's just bad? I mean, that's your viewpoint, and that's the way you're going with that? I think it's tone deaf. I think it puts them on the wrong side of this argument, John.
Yeah, and Dan, is this a winning strategy for the Trump administration? I think David's hitting on some of the reasons why for Democrats it's not a winner, but I know Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin says that he wants to introduce legislation that would end this right away. And of course, David just talked about how the president does have the right to do this. This comes immediately after, again, a DOJ staffer was violently assaulted. So it seems as though there was a personal trigger to this that force this action. But, crime has been a problem in Washington, D.C. And by the way, Chicago, Philadelphia, any major city in the United States has its issues with crime, and this was a big talking point during the campaign, right? I mean, this was crime was an issue that was coming to the forefront of concerns among Americans during the last presidential campaign. So, how do you see this as being received by the public so far?
Well, I mean, I think David hit on it. I mean, I think this is absolutely a winning strategy because people have eyes. Even liberal mainstream media anchors are saying, you know, I got mugged yesterday. I mean, it's just in DC. And so people are living this. And like David said, the stats, they're fudging this. And it's like, well, you can't hide what people are experiencing and seeing with their eyes. And I think this is probably connected to, a lot of the brazen crimes that we're seeing in places like DC, San Francisco, in these major cities. I think in the summer of BLM, when you had those riots and the cities burning, and you had politicians justifying this violence, saying, well, we should really listen to what they're saying as they're burning down the cities. And now we see groups of people going into CVS and all the stores and just, smash and grabbing what they can and then walking out. And then this all, I think, comes on the heels of the defund the police and all of that sentiment, this kind of sort of appeasing to a victim mentality amongst a lot of people in different cities, I think has given in the last few years people a reason to go in and commit more crimes. And so, I mean, I don't know about this specific one with the Doge person. I don't know what the motivation was there, but I do think in general, you've seen this sort of ripple effect happen from all of this talk of defunding the police and justifying all the violence going on. And then I think there's been an increase that's almost undeniable in these cities of the brazen attacks. People feel justified in doing this and just for whatever reason. And I think, I think Trump absolutely has a winning argument. And like David said, it puts Democrats in an incredible pickle because now they're sitting here and they're like, well, we have to oppose Trump, I guess, because Trump bad. And then they have to try to say that DC's good and everyone's just mocking them for it. It's a similar thing to a couple of other instances that Trump has sort of put them in these spots where he's clearly right on an issue that there's a crime problem in DC. And then Democrats are trying to figure out a way to make Trump look bad instead of just acknowledging the reality and dealing with the facts on the ground.
Well, and if I could just say, that sounds like the immigration situation all over again, right? It's exactly the same thing. It's just on maybe a smaller scale, if you will. So what are you? You're the anti-safety party? That's what you are? I mean, that's crazy, right? I mean, just politically, it's stupid. But they're so obsessed with Trump. Why are you so obsessed with me, as the song goes? It's ridiculous. And if I could just have a quick Dr. Phil moment for a second, if we put, maybe Trump or a little bit of maybe America on the couch for a second. Trump is the anti-status quo president. As a matter of fact, this is a guy that is just not going to do things normally. He's just not going to be normal. And I'm going to be honest with you. I think a lot of Americans want normal. They just want status quo. And yeah, is Trump a little wild and crazy and says some stuff and does some stuff? Sure. But he's anti-status quo. And he's not just going to sit back and, just do, what every politician has done before him, which is basically never in vogue in this case, the 1973 Home Rule Act provision that he did. So my point is, from a psychological perspective, I think if we're just honest with ourselves, there are a lot of folks out there. I put you, John, Dan, you, me, and everybody else. I think if you line every American up on the street, I bet you a lot of Americans would just say, you know what? I just kind of want the status quo. I'm okay with that. I just don't want the drama. I just don't want, I don't want to deal with it. And you know what? That's a problem. That's a problem. I think that's exactly what's gotten us into this mess. And I think we need to think outside the box, but a lot of people in America don't want to think outside the box, and Trump does.
Well, I think that's a fair point. And I think, if I'm looking at myself, sometimes I do just want to get things back to normal.
Yeah,
well, what's normal?
I understand.
What's normal? but that's the thing is like what normal? 1985 normal, 1995 normal, 2005 normal? Like what stage of normal am I looking to harken back to? And I think it's different for everybody, and it's different based on where you live, because I think you're right. People want to feel secure, people want to feel safe, people want to know what's coming. They want to know what's going to happen next. And obviously in life we don't know what's going to happen next. And I think that's what unsettles people with something like this, is because this hasn't ever been done before. So where is it going to lead next? And that's kind of where Congress comes into play now, David. They're going to have to, this is again a short-term fix. If there's going to be a long-term change to how the Washington D.C. police force interacts with the federal with the federal government, then it's going to have to come from Congress. House Oversight Chair James Comer is going to invite Mayor Muriel Bowser, and by invite I mean get up here. We're going to talk to you on Capitol Hill and grill you about Washington, D.C. security, and other city officials are going to be called up towards the end of this 30-day process once the House is back in session. And there are going to be Republicans who are going to be looking to write legislation. They're probably doing so right now to try and make some of this more permanent. Is that possible? How is there enough? Is Congress formatted the right way right now in terms of Republicans and Democrats for there to be anything longer term than the 30 days here?
Not at this point. The House will pass something and the Senate won't. I mean, you have to find 7 Democrats to pass something. So I don't see it. That's the short answer.
Yeah. Well, Dan, the other part of this too is not just the crime, but the homeless problem in Washington, D.C. And again, Washington, D.C. not alone with regards to a homeless problem. But I think one of the things that we have seen in Washington, D.C. is a lot of homeless encampments in the city parks. I'm just guessing that one of the things that Donald Trump sees when he's in the motorcade going back home to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, there is a lot of homeless tents and encampments along that stretch of road. And I'm sure that's not something anybody likes to see. And he wants to do away with that. He thinks it's obviously taking away from the beauty of the city. But how do they solve this particular problem? You can clear out the encampments, but then you still have these people without homes. How does that, I'm not expecting you to come up with a solution for that, but how is that going to manifest itself here over these next few weeks, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because you can clear it out. And I think you have to sort of de-incentivize people from just setting up tents and being okay with that happening in the city, right? Like, I think you should make that not a thing and make people have to look for other options. Now, that's tough because a lot of those people are in tough situations. A lot of them are addicted. Some of them are situationally homeless. But and so there's all kinds of different, avenues you can pursue to try to help those people not be homeless anymore. But I do think if you just take measures, while some of them may be tough, to de-incentive, not letting them set up a homeless encampment down the street and making it a place that's like a safe place to sit there and just set up shop, will force people to look for other options. And, but you also don't want to just, kick the can down the road and just say, well, get out of here. And good luck. So it is a tough spot, but I do think, doing things in your policies as well that de-incentivize people from just remaining on the streets. And I mean, you look at Northern Philadelphia. I live near Philadelphia, and Kensington is very famous for some of the viral videos that are going on now, but they took actions to clean up those streets a little bit. And, a lot of that is, they were just needles and open drug use out on the street and just like not prosecuting it. And so you have to crack down on that stuff, or else it's just going to run rampant.
Well, gentlemen, let's change gears to what will be the big story on Friday and most likely the beginning of next week. And that is this big meeting between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin taking place in Alaska on Friday afternoon, East Coast time. They are expected to sit down and try and move the ball down the field with regards to a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. Trump, he said earlier this week, I think he said like a 25% chance that this won't work, but he's going into this optimistically, and 75% chance is, I guess, certainly better than a lower number. But we're dealing with Vladimir Putin, who is also a wild card, and we've talked about it on this show numerous times before. What is the incentive for Vladimir Putin to meet anybody halfway at this point? Trump threatened severe consequences with Vladimir Putin if there isn't some kind of movement with regards to a peace deal, but did not specify any more on what those severe consequences would be, David. So when we are talking about this next week, or as we go through the weekend and we're looking back on what happened in Alaska on Friday, what does a victory look like for Donald Trump here, and frankly for everyone with regards to ending this war?
Well, that's a great question, because I'm not quite sure if I would necessarily phrase it that way, a victory for Trump, but I guess we have to look at it because it is navigating Trump 2.0 for sure. So I guess we got to look.
Politics in this, like there is with everything else,
well,
obviously.
Well,
sure.
There is, but I mean, I guess I'll come around to an answer on that here in a second. But let me just start with Putin, and then we can take it from there. I mean, what does Putin want, right? Putin wants to get Trump in a room and convince him to say, hey, I've got the territory in the Donbass. All right. So I've got some territory that I've conquered from Ukraine, and they lost. Ukraine lost. I'm not saying they lost the war, but they lost the Donbass region. So I get that. And honestly, I think he's got a receptive audience in Trump. I think Trump is the type of guy that is like, you know what? Stinks for you, but you did lose, Ukraine. Sorry. You're going to have to suffer the consequences, and you're going to have to give some land to Putin. That is not going to go over well, obviously. Well, forget Zelenskyy and Ukraine for 1 second. That's not going to go, I think, over well with most folks overall. But because you're rewarding Russia for their aggression, number one. But as it relates to Zelenskyy, he's going to say absolutely no way. And of course, their constitution, in essence, forbids it, right? The Ukrainian people have to vote on something like that if they're going to cede territory to another country. So I think what Putin is hoping for is to convince Trump that Putin, Russia should get the Donbass region. And then if Trump comes out and says, hey, look, Zelenskyy, yeah, they need to get that. They've won it. And I'm sorry about that, but oh well. And Zelenskyy says no, then it becomes a U.S.-Russia togetherness kind of partnership against Ukraine. And then you wonder if Trump doesn't get ticked off and say, okay, well, you know what? No more soup for you, as in food, yeah. As in money. And that's a way to isolate Ukraine. And of course, that helps Putin. So that's kind of like the three-dimensional chess. I'm sure there's a 4 and a 5-dimensional chess to it. As for Trump, let me just say this. I get it why he needs to meet him in person to a degree. I mean, it's always better to meet in person than, have a phone conversation. But a listening session is what the White House is calling this? Really? Like I said, you're going all the way to Alaska for a listening session? I don't know. Typically what happens in these situations, guys, is deals are worked out ahead of time. There is some sort of deliverable that everybody knows is coming. There's nothing like that here. And that is a problem for President Trump and this administration, because he can come away with Zippo. And I personally think Putin's been playing Trump for a long time, because as I've said time and time again, and I'll say it again, Donald Trump is the best at the art of the deal. But if there's no deal to be had, you can't be the best at the art of the deal. And I believe ultimately Putin doesn't want a deal. He might seem like he'll talk a good game, and maybe he'll agree to some sort of ceasefire, but that's not his end game. His end game is to take the Donbass region, cool his jets for a while in the ceasefire / end of the war, air quote, and then continue on, whether it be after Trump leaves office or in a year or two, whatever it happens to be. But I think that's the ultimate goal for Putin.
Yeah, and Dan, I think that is what really worries European leaders and Ukrainian leaders, is that the president will agree to some kind of land swap, the Donbas region, whatever it might be, something that Ukraine obviously can't unilaterally without, as David said, the people of Ukraine voting to approve, something that they can't and won't agree to. And there's another part of this too. They don't believe Putin should be, and they're right. I mean, they don't believe Putin should be rewarded for starting a war. They believe he should essentially be exiled as a political leader. And it sounds as though some of the things we've been hearing is that as part of a peace deal, that Putin wants to try and start doing business with the U.S. again. He wants to try and mend that relationship, and that is abhorrent to Ukrainian leaders, to European leaders, and there's some in the United States, obviously, too, who are abhor the idea of Vladimir Putin being welcomed back in, even if it's just at arm's length, being welcomed back into the international community in some way. So how valid are those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're definitely valid, and like David said, he's in a tough spot here because Putin, as you've seen over and over and over again, he says, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll talk, as long as we get to the root of the issue," and then you start going back into all the disagreements that they have and the land that they think is theirs and that Ukraine thinks is theirs. So you just get back to this spot where there's no deal to be made. So it's a tough spot. But remember, as we talked about last time, when the Ukraine-Russia stuff was coming to a head, and Trump was kind of, like you said, David, played. Remember, he initially said, "Hey, I had good talks with Putin," and he was optimistic, Trump, that there was going to be an end to this war. And then Putin's like, "Ha, just kidding. Why do I need to stop? I'm going to keep going." And I think Trump does not like to be made look bad on the national and global stage. So, I mean, we'll see if he's got an ace up his sleeve into what he's going to do in this initial meeting, because it is a little unusual if you're trying to get, broker a deal between two nations to only have one nation in there first. But maybe he's kind of trying to soften the ground here first before bringing them all in. We'll see what he does, but it's definitely a tough spot. And if he's able to navigate this one, then I think that would be huge.
And I just want to say, and this is some unconfirmed reporting, but it's out there now, and it's out there in reputable outlets, that there's talk about the United States potentially, I'm hedging, as you can tell, potentially offering some sort of deal to Russia that would, in essence, tap into some of Alaska's natural resources. And you've probably seen that. I'll be honest with you. Listen, that's above my pay grade. I'm not quite sure. Well, it's great for Russia. I'm not quite sure why the United States would do that, other than to say, "Hey, Russia, we want a ceasefire so badly that we're willing to kind of help you out a little bit here economically," though that seems to me to be ridiculous on its face. So I'm sure, we get Michael O'Hanlon and other people, we've talked to, they can explain all the inner workings of why the United States would even do that. Maybe you guys have some ideas on that. I'm still trying to figure it out, but that's a possibility. But I think it goes to the larger issue, which is, I hate to say it, but Trump's a bit desperate here. I mean, right? He was supposed to solve this in 24 hours, apparently, 24 to 48 hours. And now it's gone on for, what is it, 8 months, 9 months. And, as much as I don't think Putin's desperate for a deal, Zelenskyy may be desperate to a degree, maybe not really, but I think Trump's the biggest one that wants a deal. Because he's the guy that is the art of the deal, and he wants, he wants credit. And so when you're in a desperate situation to get the fighting to stop, you may offer certain things that maybe you'll come back to regret. I don't know, but that's just my take on it.
Well, and if you are an art of the deal guy, I think Donald Trump would be the first to recognize that you are never negotiating from a position of power if you're desperate. So that's not where you want to be. You'll give away things that you shouldn't be giving away in that case, which is, I think, what you're alluding to with the resources from Alaska. So, we'll see how that all shakes out. And Zelenskyy will not be at this meeting. Real quick, does that make sense for Zelenskyy not to be at this particular meeting?
Yeah, I think so. It sounds weird to say, one of the main players here shouldn't be at the meeting, but at this point, relations are so frayed, and there's just so much geopolitical stuff going on that it may make sense if the ultimate goal is to get a deal done. I'm not quite sure you start at 425 in the oven with Zelenskyy and Putin. I think you start at 275, 300. And then if you have to get the oven cranked up at 425 in a second meeting, you do that. I think that makes sense. But then again, I'm not Secretary of State. I'm an anchor with makeup.
All right, well, let's get to the redistricting issue going on right now. We talked about this last week on the show. Texas still has not passed their map as Democrats from the state remain out of town and unable to put together a quorum in the state house. California Governor Gavin Newsom announced on Thursday that he is planning to put a measure on the ballot in November that would allow Democrats to redraw congressional districts there in an attempt to counterbalance what Texas most likely will do once the Democrats inevitably return home and are forced to vote on this redistricting plan. So, there is some opposition, David, to this. Former Republican Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger, who's a longtime advocate of nonpartisan redistricting, Charles Munger Jr., the son of the late billionaire Berkshire Hathaway vice chairman, various state and federal California Republicans are against this, obviously, and the League of Women Voters is against this. How likely is it, David, that you think California will see this ballot, this measure on the ballot in November, and how will it succeed?
I think it's likely that it'll be on the ballot. I think it's unlikely that it'll pass, because you mentioned a lot of people that are against it. Well, why don't we start with the voters in California? The latest polls there show they're actually against it. For majority, a solid majority are against it. They want that independent redistricting commission that is in place right now. They don't want the legislature in California to have control. We got to understand, these California voters, this has been brought up to them in the last 2 to 3, 4 years, a couple of times. And voters have overwhelmingly said, yes, we want the independent redistricting commission. So now Gavin Newsom's like, you know what, actually, we don't want to do that. We're good. By the way, in that special election, the actual language would read, in essence, that they just want to get rid of the Independent Redistricting Commission for 2026, 2028, and 2020 or 2030, and then we'll start it again. Really? I mean, my goodness gracious! I mean, you can't even get more political than that. And speaking of political, let me just say something about the Democrats here. Once again, scratch your head politically, and I get what their point is, what they're trying to do. But here's the problem. What are they really against? Well, I'm assuming they're against gerrymandering, but they gerrymander themselves. So therefore, what's the real issue? Like, if you drill down on it, well, the answer, according to Democrats, is like, yeah, they're gerrymandering, but they're doing it mid-census. How dare they do it mid-census? Oh, give me a break. You know, you think voters and people out there are going to be like, wow, they did it mid-census. Wow. Well, okay, that's wonky. Who cares about any of that? The issue, the Democrats' issue is gerrymandering. None of this would matter if the Texas Republicans weren't gerrymandering. So that's their moral issue. And if that is their moral issue, well, they're doing the same, quote, immoral thing. So once again, it's hard to feel sorry for these Texas Democrats, because if your argument is basically, yeah, but they're doing it mid-census, I'm sorry. I get it. It's out of the norm, but it's not unconstitutional. There's nothing in the Constitution that says this cannot be done. I'm not saying it's popular. I'm not saying it happens. It rarely happens, if ever, but it's not unconstitutional. So anyhow, there's that.
Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, you know what this feels like to me? Like, they all have gerrymandered. I mean, Democrats have done it in the past, but like, it's popped up now because Democrats have made it an issue from what Republicans are doing. Now, if the Democrats try to push this back, it's going to be like that phenomenon you see like in NBA games where, you know, the one guy shoves a guy and the ref doesn't see it, and then you turn around and, you know, they shove him back and then he gets the technical foul. I mean, I think that's how it's going to go for Democrats here if they start trying to do this, because they've lost any wind in their sails, any credibility to do this by complaining about it the first time in what's going on in Texas. And then now they're like, well, our solution is well, we're going to do it too. I mean, there's just so many things here that I don't think are going to work out well for them. And like David said, the polls show that it doesn't look like it's very popular. And so it doesn't look like it's going to pass. And then if you even want it just for narrative purposes to say we put this out there, I don't think that helps either.
And let me just also say, Democrats are going to come back to Texas, right? I mean, they have to wait for it, in their districts, right? I mean, at some point, they've got to come back to Texas. And when they do, because they're going to lose, because Abbott and the Republicans are determined to call special session after special session. So Democrats are going to come back. We've heard rumblings that it's going to happen over the weekend, but it's happened. It's going to happen. But I guarantee you, like clockwork, what's going to happen is Democrats will call a press conference, Texas Democrats, and say, we did it. We stood up to the Republicans. Democracy reigns. We did it. And thank you, America. You lost. You lost. It's ridiculous.
And I guess the idea there is to see if you can affect enough voters for the midterm elections to say, hey, look what these guys did. They're a Democrat, but whether or not that's actually going to be the case in a state like Texas, you know, remains to be seen. But that's where we will leave it for this week. And of course, when we come back next week, we will have a lot more to talk about with Trump and Russia and Ukraine and see where things stand there. In the meantime, folks, enjoy your weekend. David Brody, Dan Andros, thanks for joining me once again here on Navigating Trump 2.0.
All right,
Thanks, John.